come back from a NATO meeting where I believe 30 of the 32 NATO partners are participating in the F35 program. They have participated since the beginning, some of whom have had significant industrial benefits. We've had our share of those. I think right now what we're seeing as we've looked at the Auditor General's report, a number of factors are at play here. And all of our NATO partners are affected by these factors. One was inflation.
Are we going to leave it at that? One was inflation. That's how it went from $19 billion to $27 billion? That is David McGuinty. Help me out here, Jim. Am I missing something here?
This is why I love doing the show, because your timing is always so exquisite. Because even as you ask me to help you, I have in front of me the very expense chart showing from the AG's office, showing the price increases from 2022 to 2024. The aircraft themselves were $10 billion in 2022. They were 12.2. It's only a 22% increase. That's your inflation. Inflation went up 22%, didn't it? In those 2 years, Aaron? Okay. You also have the contingency file in I have no idea what that means, but whatever it was, in 2022, it cost $2 billion. Wait for it. In 2024, $6.2 billion. Okay. And my personal favorite, infrastructure, which as far as I know are things like aircraft hangars and runways, went from $1.3 billion in 2022 to $2.5 in 2024. Because you know what they say about Canada, the runways are paved with gold. So, it all makes perfect sense. It's a beautiful excuse for Mark Carney to begin the process of disentangling himself from, quite frankly, a contract that a lot of people warned against. Even before any of these costs came up, Aaron, the complaint about the F-35 was it's too wired, it is too complex, there are too many bells and whistles on it. The issue now, especially with the chandelier slinging lunatic in the White House, is that the Americans have the source code for all the software and stuff on the plane. Theoretically, that's like giving someone else the remote to your TV, and they're being able to turn it on or turn it off or change the channel. And so another reason not to have this going. But once again, a perfect example of what Carney referred to yesterday during his press conference on military spending, about how the entire procurement process in this country. I mean, it's great to point the finger at contractors, and they deserve every piece of opprobrium that's thrown at them. But the fact of the matter here is that our military purchasing process is scandalously inept, scandalously incompetent, and we are quite literally paying the price now. So I guess the first step will be, and hopefully not to take another, God knows 5 years to go through a selection process of buying new jets. But it's kind of funny because everyone keeps saying, well, the CF-18, it's 40 years old and they're completely obsolete. Yeah, they're still flying. If you put a missile under one of them and you hit fire, they will fire those missiles. And at the moment, and as I mentioned yesterday, and as the world learned last weekend, sometimes the best hardware comes in a cardboard box with a remote control, and it's called a drone, and the very nature of defensive warfare has changed. So there's so many elements in the air here, but certainly the idea of paying 50% increase on costs for a questionable choice of fighter jet for this country, I think Mark Carney just had his job made a lot easier, and I would be very surprised if during the G7 and indeed during the NATO meeting, whether Canadian reps are going to be out there sniffing around for a better deal on a better model of aircraft.
But to the discussion I had with Colton Prell before the news, because obviously the question is we have to get out of this deal. How do we get out? How much is it going to cost? But if the rest of NATO is using the same model plane, does that make a difference?
I don't believe so. I mean, the idea was, let's face it, all a military strategy, NATO strategy was based on the quote-unquote Soviet Union launching an invasion into Western Europe. And so you had to have interchangeable parts. Everyone had to be on the same page in terms of technology and whatever. But as I say, this playbook is almost half a century old. And quite frankly, the idea of everybody having the same hardware to a certain extent can be very dangerous if one of your partners goes rogue. Yeah, I'm looking at you, the United States of America. So I think this idea of verifying, having a varied source of military materiel makes a lot of sense. And if nothing else, talk about a sign from heaven when the AG's report drops on the F-35 And it is basically every red flag you can think of. Get the hell out of this, even if we have to pay penalties. Something tells me it will not be close to the 50% bump that $27.7 billion will be on the hook for. And you know how these things always work, Aaron. By the time we get them, they'll be rolling them into the hangar going, they're not completely obsolete.
That's kind of how that works, yeah. Look, it's a big meeting. It's going to be a big meeting. Obviously, what Mark Carney said yesterday, Jim, about defense spending is geared so the people in NATO will hear what's going on. And I wonder if we get any help with this by the time we do meet. When's that meeting, like next week? The NATO meeting? A couple of weeks?
Yeah, no. G7 is next week.
Oh, right, G7's in Kananaskis, and then the NATO meeting after that.
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah, that's in the Netherlands.
Look, I want to just, I'm not aware of this story. You wrote, it's a downright chilling but timely warning from the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Canada. What's this about?
Richard Wagner, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Canada, has a press conference once a year. And he had his press conference today. And today, he said, you know what? You got to be careful. Don't take anything for granted, because the rule of law, the judiciary, lawyers, the very stuff that holds our society together is under attack around the world. He didn't mention the United States by name, but it would be impossible for any listener to have heard what he had to say not to include the U.S. in that. What's going on right now with Trump basically turning his back on the courts, being a law unto himself, ruling by executive order, or if you'd like, royal command. And for Mr. Justice Wagner to turn around and say, don't take things for granted. Everyone grew up with that. Freedom isn't free. These freedoms are only as good as what you want as much as you're willing to fight for them. But the thing is, here, even in this country, we can't afford to be smug. You and I have had the conversations, mostly at my end, on the absolute obscenity that is the notwithstanding clause. The idea that we can turn around and thump our chest and tell the world, look, we have this marvelous Charter of Rights, which, of course, we can rescind at a moment's notice based on the idea of any, a political party coming in and saying, no, we don't like these rights. This thing you thought that was part of your rights, you don't get that anymore, at least for the next 5 years. And the Chief Justice was also asked about this whole idea about Quebec. I'm sorry, I'll rephrase that. About Francois Legault and company calling for more power to choose, judges. And Judge Wagner kind of shrugged. That's a political decision because Carney had just given the back of his hand to this. He was not interested in giving Quebec more powers to select judges in Superior Court or in the Court of Appeal. But you also have to look at the context. Remember, Francois Legault, one of all people, Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon, the Parti Québécois, took the side of the Quebec Court of Appeal on a ruling as to whether asylum seekers were eligible for daycare benefits versus the government's contention that it wasn't. Turned around, not only accused Plamondon of being on his knees to Ottawa and their Ottawa-appointed judges, but on his belly. Now, the fact is, when you're talking with that kind of vernacular, you're using that kind of rhetoric, okay? I think it's pretty clear what the Coalition Avenir Québec's agenda is when it comes to naming judges. And no, it is not to recognize Quebec's distinct status within Confederation. It is to make sure that the tax, totally illegal legislative agenda gets through the courts, and which is something which should be blocked at every turn.
Jim, we're late, but I want to get you to weigh in on this story, because yesterday the Gazette ran the piece about the Quebec Higher Education Minister, Pascal Derry, saying they're not going to appeal a court ruling about that 33% tuition hike and francization stuff. And then today the story changes to no, they're not going to appeal because they don't feel they need to, because it's fine to just do what they want to do. Is that the essence of it? And
they'll be sued in court, because it's been shown that what they're doing is illegal. But once again, I just got through saying this is a government. This is a provincial government, a provincial party that doesn't give a damn about the rule of law, okay? And it's really up to Quebecers to see how much more they're going to swallow from people who got elected by less than 25% of the electorate turning around and ripping up the laws of our country simply because it suits their legislative agenda.
James Mennie, the Montreal Gazette. Thank you, Jim.
Demand.